Welcome to Turn It On Again, day 23, I believe, of our month-long tribute to the band Genesis here on Kit's Rock Review. And for this episode, we're going to go back to The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. In fact, we're going to talk about one song in particular. We're going to talk about the song In the Cage. As many of you know, when I talked about the song The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, I mentioned that the album itself is a concept album. It's a double album. It's a concept album. It tells the story of the Puerto Rican boy named Ray Al who lives in the Bronx and some strange events that he witnesses one day, or he's involved in one day in New York City in the mid-'70s. The album itself was a conscious attempt by Peter Gabriel, because the album before this was Selling England by the Pound. And it was a conscious attempt to not be so English, to be more international. And he was fascinated, Peter Gabriel was, after Genesis toured, and he was fascinated with New York City. So they decided to set, or Peter Gabriel did, because Peter Gabriel wrote all the lyrics for the album, to set the album in New York City as something in contrast to the pastorals of Selling England by the Pound. Anyway, as I said, this album is about the strange experiences that Ray Al had in New York City, and one of those strange experiences is detailed in the song In the Cage. And instead of trying to explain to you an interpretation of In the Cage, I'm going to read to you from the liner notes of the album. So Peter Gabriel put the plot of the album in the liner notes. I'll let you decide what you think happened during the song In the Cage. Okay, so Ray Al wakes up in a cold sweat with a strong urge to vomit. There's no sign of the cocoon, and he can see more of the cave about him. There is much more of the glowing water dripping from the roof, and stalactites and stalagmites are forming and decomposing at an accelerating rate all around him. As fear and shock register, he assures himself that self-control will provide more security, but this thought is abandoned as the stalactites and stalagmites lock into a fixed position, forming a cage whose bars are moving towards him. At one moment, there is a flash of light, and he sees an infinite network of cages, all strung together by a rope-like material. As the rocky bars press in on Ray Al's body, he sees his brother John outside, looking in. John's face is motionless despite screams for help. But in his vacant expression, a tear of blood forms and trickles down his cheek. Then he calmly walks away, leaving Ray Al to face the pains which are beginning to sweep through his body. However, just as John walks out of sight, the cage dissolves, and Ray Al is left spinning like a top. So that's the events that happen in the song The Cage on The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. But even after Peter Gabriel left the band, the song The Cage was an important feature of the Genesis live sets, with Phil Collins now singing lead vocals and playing drums during the intermental sections. In fact, Genesis would often use In the Cage as the beginning of a set of medleys for instrumental passages from other songs. For example, on the Three Sides Live album, In the Cage goes into the Cinema Show and then into Afterglow. On the Invisible Touch tour, they played the song. It's not on the Invisible Touch tour DVD that came out, but they did play In the Cage, and it went into In That Quiet Earth from Wind and Wuthering, and then into Afterglow. And also included in that Invisible Touch tour, they also include parts of Supper's Ready in the medley within the Cage. In 2007, they played it, and it was In the Cage, followed by Duke's Travels into Afterglow. So it's still an important part of Genesis live sets. I haven't heard if they're playing it on the current tour. I've been trying to avoid live sets because I want to be surprised by what I see. I hope they are. So what I'm going to do in the comments, I'm going to put the studio version from Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, and then I'm going to find a live version from one of their 80s tours just to show you how they used it to introduce some instrumental passages and medleys. Anyway, until next time, follow the advice of Mr. Neil Young. Keep on rocking in the free world. See you later.